Journalist Kenny Xu has written a book, An Inconvenient Minority, which looks at the treatment of Asian Americans in the US education system and how the so-called woke policies of the left are damaging to American society. The book examines the effects of present-day policies such as eliminating standardized testing, racial preferencing of non-Asian minorities, the peddling of anti-Asian stereotypes and lumping of Asians into privileged categories. Kenny Xu, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate it.
Look, you've got a new book out soon. I think it's in about July, if I recall correctly. An Inconvenient Minority, the Ivy League admission cases and the attack on Asian American excellence. Tell me, why did you choose this title?
Because Asian Americans in our culture today, and especially in America, and maybe in Australia too, there's this narrative right now with regards to race that says if you're white, you're privileged, if you're black, you're oppressed. Well, where do Asian Americans fit? Because on one level, we're supposed to be a minority, meaning we're supposed to be victims of society. We're supposed to play the part of being oppressed by society. But as you can see with every statistic, Asian Americans inconvenience that narrative. We have higher incomes, higher educational statistics, lower rates of crime than even white people in many cases in this country. And as a result of that, the left does not treat Asian Americans as a minority. In fact, in the cases of the Ivy Leagues, they treat Asian Americans worse than whites.
Harvard University grades on three things. Academics, makes sense. Extracurriculars, not too sure about that one, and a personality score. Tell us about this personality score. It's not really a personality at all, is it? It's quite racist.
So exactly. It's Harvard's preferred method of discriminating against Asian Americans. So the statistics are all out, and according to every objective metric, Asian Americans have to get about 240 points higher than whites to have the same chance of admission as whites, and about 440 points higher than blacks to have the same chance of admission to a school like Harvard University. And the way that they get away with this is in their rating system, they use this thing called a personality score. And the personality score is an entirely subjective evaluation. It's not backed up by any objective evidence that goes along with it. Basically, you come in and a Harvard interviewer says, it addresses things like, are you likable? Are you humor? Do you have humor? Do they see you as charismatic? And in all of these things, it's funny, Asian Americans score highest on academics, highest on extracurriculars, but for some reason score lowest on the personality score. And they use this metric to really balance for races.
Can you point to the most damaging policies and long-term impacts on Asian Americans and US society generally?
Well, I have to say this. The use of the personality score is very damaging, I think, to the Asian American mind and consciousness, because we're used to these stereotypes that says, oh, we're test-taking robots with no personality and everything like that. And the funny thing about these statistics is actually I digged into the data, which is part of my book, An Inconvenient Minority. I dig into the data and I show how all of the objective measures of so-called personality, like alumni interviews, teacher recommendations, Asians stack up well compared to whites and blacks and Hispanics. But when it comes to this final review process, they put all of these things together and they say, you're good, but you're not good enough. And that's the message that they put on Asian Americans to keep telling them, we're going to grade you on a different standard just because of the color of your skin. And because so many Asian Americans and so many immigrant parents, value prestige, value these Ivy League universities, the fact that Ivy League universities are doing this to Asian Americans causes many Asian Americans to doubt themselves, to feel bad, to actually feel justifiably frustrated about their place in society.
It's really sad that excellence is penalised. I sort of think maybe there's a bit of jealousy there too. In Australia, we call it the tall poppy syndrome, and we've just got to chop you down if you succeed or are too successful or look like you'll be very successful. Now, does your book focus exclusively on the US education system, or are there other areas where Asian Americans are facing new or overt discrimination?
Well, it's interesting you bring up, is it just a US phenomenon? I think I did an interview with a couple of people in Australia, and I know that among some of your most elite universities, even in Australia, the population of Asians, especially Chinese Australians in those universities is, disproportionate to their population in the population. And I can see what happens is, if America, which is still the cultural center of the world, if America exports this kind of race ideology across the rest of the world to inspire this resentment against high achieving students and excellent people who can contribute to the country's culture of excellence, that could have worldwide reverberating effects. That could cause the left in many other countries to have and house suspicion against Asian Americans. Suspicion against Asian Americans isn't new, but what Harvard University is doing is it's legitimizing it in the eyes of the left and the elite public.
What about reaction from various groups? For example, the academia. How are they feeling about this?
So I talk about this in my book, in An Inconvenient Minority, and academia, which, as we know, leans left, leans liberal, they feel a great sense of shame. They feel a great sense of guilt over their supposed role in perpetuating this exclusive privileged system. Because as we know, Harvard University and all of these Ivy League universities, they're sitting on piles and piles of cash. They are some of the most privileged places on earth to be in. And a lot of these academics feel great guilt about being in that system. And so what do? They use this race ideology as an attempt to salve their moral guilt. The guilt that they feel. They use race preferences and they say, oh, this is how we take care of black people. This is how we take care of Hispanic people. Where in reality, the statistics show that just creating victim classes and then affirmatively trying to put them into these elite universities where they're not qualified actually tends to have a lot of detrimental effects on these populations. A lot of these populations, Blacks and Hispanics, get discouraged. They have lower graduation rates. They have higher dropout rates, higher rates of depression, tend to graduate at the lower end of their class. And so this entire program, this entire race preferences program, does not do much to help people and does a lot to hurt people.
What about the media? You're in the media yourself with the Federalist and I think the Daily Signal, so you obviously know all about censorship. What about take out those two? Any other censorship being applied to yourself and the book?
So far, I'm very fortunate. I can't guarantee it so far. That's why me and my publisher, which I'm very grateful to work with, Diversion Books, they really specialize in getting the book to a variety of different outlets. That means we're not just going with Amazon. We are pursuing all avenues. That's why I would encourage your viewers, if you guys are interested in buying the book, to buy it, at an indie bookstore like Brookline Brooks Smith, or to get it at Walmart, and everything like that. That helps to temper down the expectations of just focusing too much on big tech and their censorship.
What about yourself from the start of writing the book, researching it and writing it and thinking about it? How have your opinions changed from the thought process of doing the book to now? Would have been some minor changes or major changes within yourself?
I hope that in terms of changes, I hope that America will realize that race as a category is really not a proper way to negotiate yourself in American society anymore. Race as a category increasingly means little in American society. More Americans are multiracial than ever. There's a higher rate of intermarriage than ever. There's a higher rate of fourth generation Hispanic, Asian Americans who more or less are of the dominant American culture. And even Black Americans, You try to put a black American in a country like Nigeria or in a country like South Africa, people will instantly recognize them for being an American. The American identity, I think, overwhelms, as it should, the supposed racial classes and racial narratives that elite institutions like Harvard and Yale and Princeton are trying to propagate.
Sidebar question here, Your Honour. When Trump was in power, and now we have the Biden administration, which was worse? I would say
the Trump administration did a couple of good things with regards to Asian Americans. First, they supported the lawsuit against Yale University, which is a similar lawsuit for discriminating against Asian Americans. And the Yale investigation, as I reveal in my book, An Inconvenient Minority, is actually a huge investigation. At the Trump administration Department of Justice found that Yale discriminates by race on all four aspects of their admissions process, from the initial review to the group committee to the final review committee. Yale uses a plus factor if you're black or Hispanic and a minus factor if you're white or Asian, and they do that 4 times. So it really compounds the process 4 times against Asian Americans. Imagine having that high of a penalty weighed against you. So I think the Trump administration was good that they called it out. The Biden administration the Biden administration dropped that lawsuit. They said it wasn't going to be a focus of them anymore. And yet they make all of these executive orders to say we want to combat anti-Asian racism and everything like that due to COVID. It shows to me that the current administration, is only interested in defending Asian Americans when it fits their desired policy outcomes.
It's going to be an exciting time for you, July, middle of summer for you. And so a barbecue, a good book to read, a couple of wines to sip. What a wonderful way to while away the woes of the world. An Inconvenient Minority, out in July. What's the exact date?
July 13th, Mike.
Is it a Friday?
I think so, yes.
Oh, Friday the 13th. At least we're not suspicious.
Yeah.
Kenny Xu, thank you very much.
I appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.
He's just about been everywhere around the US and overseas, ships, Australia, up and down the coast. In the US, worked just about on every radio station there is. Some were legal, some were not. One of the places that Kirk Clark worked at was at KDON, KDON, 101.5. Is that right? 102. No, 102 and a half. How can I forget my station? 102 and a half.
Right. 102.5 KDON.
Yes.
Right.
Now it's what I noticed there in Salinas. There was a very strong Hispanic element there.
Oh my!
And
yes.
very important for the area, because they provide great resources in labour and so forth. Tell us about your experiences in towns like Salinas, where Hispanic immigrants were pretty important to the local economy.
Well, first of all, you hear so much where people say, especially years ago, it's America, learn English. And I think that's a great thing. Anybody coming to a new country should learn the native language. But, let's look at the calendar. How long ago were we there in Salinas? It was 1985.
Oh, my God.
That I got this textbook. It's Said and Done. That's in Spanish. This I bought at the community college, Hartnell Community College in Salinas, California, to try to become semi-proficient in Spanish. Now, about 2002, 2003, I went to Pátzcuaro, which is in Michoacan, one of the 31 states of Mexico. And at that point, I went to a Spanish language school, and they said I was the worst student they ever had.
I believe that.
Well, they said that most people come there with at least some limited knowledge. Obviously, this course from back in 1985 didn't work out too well. But the point of this is, Spanish is not that hard a language to learn. Actually, if you're a native Spanish speaker, it's much tougher to learn English, because you've got things like 3 different versions of to spelled in different ways, 3 different versions of there, all spelled different ways, all with different meanings. Not that tough in Spanish. I could actually spell a little better in Spanish than I can in English. But the bottom line is, it is hard to learn a language when you're an adult that is not your native tongue. And one of the things that amazes me, I live in a neighborhood that is predominantly Hispanic. I would say 70% of my neighbors here in East Las Vegas, English is not their native language. So it is a real challenge to try to know what people are saying and kind of adapt to the local customs and some of the local dialects. But the kids are amazing. You've got kids 6, 7, 8 years old, and what a lot of them did, and still do, but especially in the past, is you'll have kids that are 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and they are the translators for their parents, because their parents, kind of like me, trying to learn Spanish, they're trying to learn English and having a tough time. But these kids, they are young children, and they go instantly. They go fluently so quickly from English to Spanish. It is really remarkable. That is a great skill. So people that want, America to be monolinguistic, what are you talking about? When I worked in Europe, and you mentioned working overseas, I was one of the last morning disc jockeys on pirate radio in the North Sea. And one of the reasons that I didn't get picked up as one of the original disc jockeys on MTV Europe was because of the old thing they said, if you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. If you speak 2 languages, you're bilingual. If you speak 1 language, hey, you're an American. So being able to speak other tongues is a great thing. And you talk about Salinas, it's an interesting town here, Monterey. A lot of people have heard of Monterey and Pebble Beach with the golf course there. Pebble Beach and the classic cars of the Concours d'Elegance that they have every year. So you've got the incredibly wealthy coast where you've got Carmel, where Clint Eastwood back in the day was the mayor. Houses there, a shack is $1 million. And then you go inland, and that is the area that feeds America. It's simply remarkable. And what brought it home to me was back in the days, we're talking the mid-'80s, you could take the agricultural tour of Monterey and Santa Cruz counties. And that was an amazing day. I don't think you ever took one, but I loved to go on them. The local chambers of commerces would take you on them. And Monterey County produces an unbelievable amount of crops that feed the nation. And you'd see the people there working, mostly Hispanics from Mexico and other Central American nations, and the work they do. And I saw folks mushroom cutters. I wish I had pictures to show you of what it's like to cut mushrooms. Unbelievably hard work in these dark, dingy, dank places, and to pick strawberries. I went out there and tried to pick strawberries for an hour, and I'm like, this is when I was younger. You can do the math, back in the 80s, and it is literally back-breaking work. These people are incredibly skilled, they're incredibly talented, and they are a necessity for America. You go back to the days of World War II, and the nation was begging Hispanics, Mexicans, to come up and be with us. So you've got the crisis right now on the border, and there's no denying that it is a crisis. But compare the crises, compare what's happening on the border to what's happening with COVID, say, in the United States right now. It is an issue that needs to be addressed. The youth that are coming across it, just imagine that for the parents. Saying conditions are so bad where you may be, El Salvador, Honduras, one of the other Central, Guatemala, one of the other Central American nations, conditions are so bad for you that you are willing to have your 10 or 12 or 14-year-old child go across into another country by themselves to trying to improve their situation. I mean, that is hard for me to fathom. And what America needs to do, of course, is get those kids, if they do have sponsors or relatives that are living here in the United States, to get those kids to those people. And it's not an easy answer. But the bottom line is I like living in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood because the community and the family structure, to me, seems much better than in a predominantly, American neighborhood. So I have generally, not specifically, there is a drug cartel. There are issues in Mexico, but I was there right before the pandemic and can't wait to get back again. Got my Mexico map ready to go. And El Mapo, very important for Mexico. Surprisingly, it is hard to find good maps in Mexico. Got my Baja California map ready to go. So to me, I have generally very positive things to say about Mexico. And to give you an idea about why there is some degree of corruption is because what does a police officer make in Mexico? Mike, take a guess what the average monthly salary in U.S. dollars for a police officer would be in Mexico.
Probably 500.
That is exactly. You reading my notes? You read my notes?
I'm looking over your shoulder.
Oh, that is exactly right. So you're looking at that, and the common nomenclature hasn't happened to me yet, but if you get pulled over for a traffic ticket in Mexico, your best bet is just to bribe the cops with $20 or $30. Is that ethical? Is that a good thing? I don't know.
No, but if I gave Australian money, they'd arrest me.
You know, it's funny because Mexican money looks a lot like Australian money. It's made out of the same material.
They're worth the same, probably.
It's about 22 to 1 on the pesos. It varies.
I have to say, the Mexicans, having lived in Salinas and in Lompoc, and I've been back so many times to the US. It's my second home, basically. Got to say, first of all, one of the great things about America generally is the community, and the rural areas in California, with the multiracial element, which you had Mexicans or Hispanics from all parts of South America. You had the odd Aussie, and this great community, and it was just an amazing experience. And they really do add so much to a community, and it's. But you've been to Mexico yourself many times, and that's probably one of the things that really interests you about Mexico is how close they are, how much family means to them.
And it really does. I mean, you say same thing with the drug cartels. You got to be careful with those folks because they're family. But they're generally not going to mess with the gringos. I mean, as long as you stay out of their way, they will stay out of your way. It's a little unnerving sometimes to see the federales, in their Jeeps with their machine guns mounted on the back. But what do we have in the U.S.? It's not that much different. But one of the things we're looking at seriously, we would have been probably in final preparations for departure had Trump won the election. But we are still, as soon as the border opens up, and right now we still have this strange situation going on where you can fly to Mexico. There are no prohibitions. We have flights every day from Las Vegas to Guadalajara to Mexico City, but you can't drive unless you have a essential work obligation or an essential need for the country to drive to Mexico. So as soon as that border opens up, we are heading down there. We're going to do kind of a reconnaissance to scope out the situation and see if it is a reality that we are going to go to Mexico, because there are some very nice and very large expatriate communities in Mexico, because the reality of the situation is, for what it would cost you maybe $5,000 a month to live a modest lifestyle in the United States as a retiree, for that amount of money, you can live very, very well in Mexico. So there are issues, no doubt. But what we have, and I wanted to point this out, we're talking about radio earlier, and talk radio has been, oh my gosh, one of the things we have here at the Desert, Mike, is dust. So I picked up a pair of glasses at a dollar store glasses that have been out here. They're so covered with dust, I can't even see out of them. But I printed out the ratings from some talk radio stations in some mid-sized markets. For instance, Fort Myers, Florida, Greenville, South Carolina. The number one stations in those markets are talk stations. And what are they talking about? They're talking about the threat. They're talking about the danger. They're talking about the risks that the Mexicans pose to the United States. One of the many jobs that I do here in Las Vegas, occasionally go out and deliver packages, yes, for the big evil Amazon sometimes. And I've been right to the edge of the frontier, and they might still have a gated community on the edge of the frontier. And I'm thinking, what are you doing? Why do you have a gated community of maybe 30 or 40 houses right here next to the mountains when there's nothing for the next 50, 60 miles? I talked to a guy one day, and he says, well, those Mexicans, they want to come out here, and they're going to steal our furniture in their pickup trucks. That's why we have the gate. And I'm thinking, are you nuts? I didn't say that. I'm out there working, but I'm thinking, this is the mentality that these talk radio stations are giving to so many Americans. They're feeding a narrative that these 12-year-old kids streaming across the border are going to be a huge threat to the health and safety. No, what we have is we have The Republicans, basically the white male, me, but I'm not one of them. That's you know by sure for a night now, if you see me here before, that they want to maintain the power structure. And with more and more Hispanic, that control is waning. One thing you can do, if you want to see how this is take a look at any dating app. Any dating, straight, gay, doesn't matter, BDSM, whatever your flavor. Take a look and look at the people there here in Las Vegas. Way under 50% are Caucasian because that is what is happening. That is the melting pot that we have of society, and some people simply do not want that to change. So these talk radio stations, they don't want to change. They get upset. They yell about it like the dog. These talk radio stations, they are doing all they can to pump the propaganda to make Mexicans seem so scary. And I love them. I love Mexican food. I love bouncy houses. Do you know what a bouncy house is?
Yes, I do. They're dangerous. They can blow away.
Well, these are huge bouncy houses.
Yeah, but big ones still blow away.
I guess they could, but you have to have a lot of weight. We have a 4-meter rabbit for Easter. You can't really see it, but it's at the edge of our property. So we have a 4-meter rabbit. But I mean, just the fun. I would call our neighborhood, to some people that live in those far distant gated communities, they would think our neighborhood's scary. I think it's fun with culture and excitement, and mainly because I'm the outcast. I'm the rare white guy in a Hispanic neighborhood here in Las Vegas.
I have to, going back to the story about the guy in the gated community that was convinced that the Mexicans were going to steal his furniture. If he knew that where you lived, and if he knew that you were surrounded by Mexicans, and if he knew that your furniture wasn't stolen by now, he probably thinks you have bad taste in furniture because they don't want it.
That is exactly true. So, I mean, I just want to point out that Mexico gets a lot of bad press here in the United States. But the thing it really does, and the other Central American countries, it's kind of like transgender situation now. We have states that are trying to make it illegal for a physician to perform their best determined care of their patient, to make it illegal to give treatment to a minor who is transgender. Blows my mind. These people clearly have not met transgender men, women, boys, and girls, because there's some amazing people. Kind of the same situation with these people that live in fear of Mexico. They clearly have not been to Mexico and seen the Mexicans and seen what's there and seen the beauty. I mean, it's a big country. It is a big, big country. 31 states in Mexico. Get one of these before you go if you're going to be doing some traveling. And it's just a remarkable place. I think that there's a real possibility that if we're still doing these, say 2 years from now, it will be from Baja California Sur.
Fantastic. This is our new segment. It's our National Geographic segment. That map was really good. I think we'll use a green screen next time, Kirk. Kirk Clyde from Little Mexico in Las Vegas. That's almost coming to life. Kirk, thanks very much.
Mexico City, right here. There you go.
And that's it for Asia Pacific Today. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Mike Ryan.